Cale Vross had always imagined that when he finally died, it would be somewhere interesting. A firefight on a mining colony, perhaps, or in the pristine operating theater of a core world hospital, where they'd at least have the decency to try saving him. Instead, he was probably going to suffocate in the bowels of a 200-year-old corpse ship that smelled like recycled dreams and broken promises. The threshold's echo groaned around him, a sound that started somewhere in the superstructure and traveled through kilometers of dead metal until it reached his bones. His headlamp carved a tunnel through darkness, so thick it seemed to have texture, illuminating walls slick with condensation that had nowhere left to go. The generation ship had been breathing its own exhalations for 2 centuries, and it showed. Medical bay should be another 100 meters, Cale muttered into his comm, knowing his crew wouldn't respond. They were 3 decks up, stripping computational cores from what used to be the navigation hub, and they'd made it abundantly clear that wandering off into structurally questionable sections was his particular brand of stupidity, not theirs. Just wanted you all to know that if I get crushed by a falling bulkhead, I'm haunting Reeves first. He ate my protein bar. Static answered him. The ship's corroded infrastructure played hell with communications, which was just another item on the long list of reasons this salvage operation violated at least 6 safety protocols. But pre-collapse medical technology was worth enough to justify the risk, or so their captain had insisted, while simultaneously refusing to come down here himself. The corridor opened into what his scanner identified as a junction point. Bioluminescent panels lined the ceiling, their genetically engineered organisms somehow still clinging to life after all these years, casting everything in a sickly green glow that made him feel like he was walking through the digestive tract of something enormous and dying. Which he supposed he was. Cale paused at the junction, consulting his handheld scanner. The medical bay entrance should be directly ahead, through a blast door that his readings suggested was half open and jammed. Perfect. He'd gone to medical school with dreams of elegant diagnoses and grateful patients, and instead he'd become the idiot who crawled into dead ships to steal their organs. His mother would be so proud. He squeezed through the gap in the blast door, his suit scraping against metal that flaked away at the touch. The medical bay beyond was larger than he'd expected, a cavernous space that must have served the ship's population of thousands. Examination pods lined the walls like empty chrysalises, their transparent covers clouded with age. Surgical platforms hung from the ceiling on mechanical arms, frozen in positions that suggested they'd stopped mid-procedure when the ship's power finally failed. Something moved in the darkness. Cale froze, his hand instinctively going to the plasma cutter at his belt. Ships like this played tricks on the mind. Shadows became movement, groaning metal became footsteps, and perfectly rational salvagers started filing reports about ghosts. He'd read enough of those reports to know better than to trust his first impression. But his scanner disagreed with his rationalization. The screen showed a heat signature, faint but present, emanating from behind a collapsed surgical platform in the far corner of the bay. His heart rate kicked up, and his suit's biometric display helpfully informed him that his stress levels were elevated, as if he needed a computer to tell him he was scared. "This is the part where I should turn around," he said to the empty bay. "This is the part where the smart protagonist makes smart choices and lives to complain about his job another day." He moved toward the heat signature. The collapsed platform had fallen at an angle, creating a small space underneath. Cale's headlamp swept across the debris field, catching glimpses of shattered medical equipment and scattered supply containers. Then the light found something that made his breath catch. Hair, the color of molten gold, spilling across the deck plating. Skin that shone blue even under the harsh white beam of his lamp. And an ear, elegantly pointed and far too long to be human, visible through the cascade of golden strands. "Oh, you've got to be kidding me," Cale whispered, dropping to his knees beside the debris. His scanner confirmed what his eyes refused to believe. Heartbeat, present, Respiration, shallow but steady. Body temperature, low but not critical. Someone was alive under there. Someone had been alive under here in this dead ship for an impossible amount of time. He keyed his comm. "Reeves, you're not going to believe this. I need medical supplies down here immediately. Full trauma kit." Static hissed back at him. "Reeves?" Nothing. The junction must have been the limit of their communication range. He was on his own. Cale shrugged off his pack and pulled out his portable medkit, his hands moving through familiar motions while his mind raced through impossibilities. The Threshold's echo had been dead for 200 years. The historical records were clear on that point. No distress calls, no survivor pods launched, just a ship that went silent as it drifted into the Veil Nebula's outer reaches. Whatever was under this platform shouldn't be breathing. He began clearing debris, carefully shifting pieces of the fallen surgical platform. Each movement sent small vibrations through the floor, and with each vibration he heard it. A sound so soft he almost missed it beneath the ship's ambient groaning. Breathing, definitely breathing. "Hey," he called out, his voice absurdly loud in the quiet bay. "Can you hear me? I'm Cale. I'm a medic. I'm going to get you out of there, but I need you to stay still, all right? Don't try to move." For a long moment, nothing. Then, impossibly, a voice emerged from beneath the debris. The words were foreign, musical in a way that human languages never quite achieved, but his translator caught them and rendered them into something approximating meaning. Waiting. Was waiting. Cale's hand stilled. Waiting for what? For someone to find me, for someone to stay. The blue-skinned woman's golden eyes opened in the darkness beneath the platform, and they found his face with an intensity that made him forget, just for a moment, that he was trapped in a dying ship with oxygen levels dropping, and a crew that would leave without him in exactly 4 hours. "Well," Cale said, reaching beneath the debris to check for injuries, his fingers finding hers in the dark, feeling them close around his hand with surprising strength. "Your timing is terrible, but I guess we're doing this." The debris field around Lyria looked worse once Cale got his full med scanner working. The surgical platform had her pinned from the waist down, and what his initial readings had optimistically labeled as moderate crush injury turned out to be a catastrophic mess of shattered bone and torn tissue. Her left leg was trapped beneath at least 200 kilos of collapsed machinery, and the angle suggested things inside were very much not where they should be. "All right, so here's the situation," Cale said, pulling his diagnostic pad closer to study the readings. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being a paper cut and 10 being "please write my eulogy," you're sitting at about a 7, maybe 7.5. Lyria's translator struggled with his words for a moment before rendering them into something she could understand. Her golden eyes, still locked on his face with that unnerving intensity, narrowed slightly. When she spoke, her voice carried a tremor that might have been pain or might have been something closer to dark amusement. "Your healing numbers are strange. My people would simply say dying or not dying. See, that's too binary for modern medicine. We like our patients to have hope while we frantically figure out what to do." Cale shifted position, trying to get a better angle on the machinery without putting weight on anything that might shift. The last thing he needed was to make this worse. "I'm going to examine you now. It's going to hurt and you're probably going to want to hit me. Please don't hit me, I'm fragile." He ran his scanner along the length of her trapped leg, watching the holographic display build a 3-dimensional map of the damage. It was worse than he'd thought. The femur had compound fractures in 3 places, the knee joint was completely destroyed, and there was significant vascular compromise. Without proper surgical equipment, attempting to move her could trigger a fatal bleed. Lyria's fingers found his shirt. Not his hand this time, but a fistful of the fabric at his shoulder, twisting it with strength that suggested she was considerably tougher than she looked. Her long ears flattened against her skull as his scanner passed over the worst of the damage. "Tell me something," she said, her words coming faster now, like she needed distraction from what his examination was revealing. Are all human healers as pessimistic as you? Only the good ones. The optimistic ones tend to make promises they can't keep, and then everyone's disappointed. Kale set the scanner aside and began pulling equipment from his med kit. Coagulation foam, bone stabilizers, nerve blocks, a portable surgical laser he'd been saving for emergencies. This qualified. The truly great ones are pessimistic and wrong. I'm aiming for that. The emergency lighting chose that moment to flicker, plunging them into darkness for 3 full seconds before the bioluminescent panels reluctantly resumed their sickly glow. Something in the distance made a sound like tearing metal, and the deck plates beneath them shuddered. "Your ship is dying," Lyria observed. "It's not my ship. I'm just robbing its corpse. There's a difference." Kale prepped the nerve block injector, checking the dosage calculations against what his scanner had determined about her physiology. Alien biology was always a gamble. Too little and she'd feel everything. Too much and he'd stop her heart. This is going to sting, then go numb, hopefully in that order. He administered the injection at 3 points along her trapped leg, watching her face for adverse reactions. Her jaw clenched and her grip on his shirt tightened enough that he heard stitches pop, but she didn't cry out. Tuff didn't begin to cover it. "How long were you in cryostasis?" he asked, partly to distract her and partly because he genuinely needed to know. The nerve block needed time to take effect, and filling the silence seemed better than listening to the ship groan its way toward structural failure. 73 years. The pod was supposed to wake me when we reached the destination coordinates, but the ship stopped moving decades ago. The systems failed gradually. I woke when the platform collapsed. Her golden eyes tracked his movements as he assembled what passed for a surgical setup in the cramped space. "You are the first living thing I have seen since we fled." "Fled from what?" Lyria's expression shifted, something ancient and terrible moving behind her eyes. "The unmaking, a force that consumed worlds, civilizations, entire star systems. My people sent ships in every direction, hoping some would escape its reach. I do not know if any others survived." Kale paused in his work, meeting her gaze. The weight of her words hung between them, and for a moment the absurdity of his situation crystallized into sharp focus. He was trying to save the last survivor of a dead civilization with a med kit, designed for treating decompression injuries and plasma burns. And they were having this conversation in a collapsing derelict, with approximately 3 hours and 45 minutes before his crew left without him. "Well," he said finally, "that's depressing. Let's focus on the more immediate problem of your leg trying to kill you." He activated the coagulation foam dispenser, a device that looked disturbingly like a caulking gun and functioned on roughly the same principle. The foam would seal off the major bleeders when he started moving the debris, buying him precious seconds to work. In theory. In practice, field medicine was mostly improvisation held together with hope and profanity. "I am going to die here," Lyria said, and it wasn't a question. "Probably not. I'm annoyingly persistent." Kale tested the nerve block by pressing against her shin. No reaction. Good. "Though I'll be honest, this would be a lot easier if you'd gotten crushed somewhere with better lighting and functional gravity. The ambience here is really killing my concentration." "You make jokes when you are afraid." "I make jokes when I'm awake. Fear just makes them worse." He positioned himself beside the platform's edge, calculating angles and leverage points. "When I lift this, you're going to feel pressure release, and then significantly more pain as blood flow returns. That's normal. What's not normal is if you feel sudden cold, uncontrollable shaking, or an overwhelming urge to insult my medical skills. Those mean something's gone wrong. And if something goes wrong, then we'll both be very surprised and you'll get to be right about dying here." Kale gripped the platform's edge, testing its weight, heavy but manageable if he used the hydraulic jack from his salvage kit. "Ready." Lyria's fingers tightened on his shirt again, pulling him slightly closer. This close, he could see that her golden hair wasn't entirely gold. It carried threads of silver that caught the bioluminescent light. Her long ears twitched with each breath, and there was something fragile in her expression that contradicted the strength in her grip. "Don't let go," she whispered, and his translator rendered the words with an emotional weight that the simple phrase couldn't fully carry in human terms. "Wasn't planning on it," Cale said, and meant it in ways that probably weren't entirely professional. He activated the hydraulic jack. The hydraulic jack screamed as it pushed against 2 centuries of settled weight. Metal groaned, stress fractures spiderwebbed across the surgical platform's support struts, and Cale discovered that his arm muscles had apparently filed for early retirement sometime in the last 30 seconds. The platform rose incrementally, each centimeter gained feeling like a personal victory against physics itself. Lyria's breath came in sharp gasps as circulation returned to her crushed leg. Her fingers twisted deeper into his shirt, and Cale was fairly certain she was going to tear the thing in half before this was over. He'd paid good money for this shirt too, which seemed like a petty thing to think about while performing emergency surgery in a dying spaceship. But his mind had apparently decided that focusing on trivial concerns was better than confronting the reality of what his scanner was showing him. "Talk to me," he said, bracing his shoulder against the jack's control lever. "Tell me something about your world. Distraction is medically proven to reduce perceived pain." "That is a lie." "Yes, but it's a comforting lie, which is basically what medicine is." The platform lifted another few centimeters, and Cale quickly shoved a piece of debris underneath to hold the gap. "Come on, humor the dying ship's only medic. What was your world like?" Lyria's jaw clenched so hard he could hear her teeth grinding, but she spoke through the pain. "We built our cities in the canopy layer. The trees on my world grew kilometers tall, their branches wide enough to support entire districts. We never touched the ground. It was considered sacred." "Sounds beautiful, also terrifying. What if you fell?" "We did not fall, we had wings." Cale paused in his work, glancing at her back where her suit was torn. No wings. Just smooth blue skin marred by contusions and the general abuse of being crushed under medical equipment. We bred them out generations ago. They were beautiful but impractical for space travel. The gene sequences still exist in our medical archives. Her voice caught as another wave of pain hit. "Existed. I do not know what survives anymore." The jack reached its maximum extension. Cale grabbed his plasma cutter and began slicing through the platform's support struts, the tool's bright blue beam casting wild shadows across the medical bay. Each cut sent vibrations through the floor, and somewhere in the ship's superstructure, something made a sound like a giant clearing its throat before dying. "Your ship is very loud when it dies," Lyria observed. "It's expressing its feelings, very healthy, emotionally speaking." Cale finished the cut and the platform section tilted away, finally freeing her leg. The sight made him wince despite years of field experience. Her translator's rendering of his muttered curse probably didn't do justice to the creativity of his profanity. He sprayed coagulation foam across the worst of the bleeding, watching it expand and seal like biological concrete. His hands moved through practiced motions while his mind raced through treatment options, most of which started with "impossible" and ended with "you're both going to die here." The bone stimulator would help with the fractures, but the joint damage was catastrophic. She'd need reconstructive surgery, real surgery in a real facility, not field triage in the dark. "The pain," Lyria said, her voice tight. "It is different now. That's the nerves waking up and collectively screaming about their terrible life choices. Welcome to the party." Cale began splinting her leg with salvaged materials, turning broken equipment into makeshift medical devices, with the kind of improvisation that would make his medical school professors weep. On a scale of stabbing to burning to someone playing drums on your bones, what are we working with? All of those simultaneously. That's the spirit, complain loudly. It means you're alive. He wrapped the splint with synth fiber bandaging, trying not to think about how inadequate this all was. She needed a surgical pod, a real doctor, and about 6 weeks of recovery time. What she had was him, a handful of supplies, and approximately 3 hours before his crew departed. His comm crackled suddenly, Reeve's voice cutting through the static like a miracle. "Vross, you still breathing down there? We're reading power fluctuations in your section." Kale keyed his response. "Alive and regretting my life choices. I've got a situation. I need medical supplies, a grav stretcher, and someone to tell me I'm not crazy." "What kind of situation?" "The kind where I found someone who's been in cryo for 73 years and is currently trapped under a collapsed surgical platform with a leg that looks like it argued with a hydraulic press and lost." Silence. "Then you're joking." "I'm really not. And before you ask, yes, she's alive, and yes, I'm trying to extract her, and no, I don't know how this is possible." Kale checked Lyria's vital signs on his scanner. Stable, barely. "How long until we're wheels up?" 3 hours, 8 minutes. Captain's not going to wait, Vross. You know the protocols." "I know." Kale looked at Lyria, at her golden eyes watching him with an expression that somehow managed to be both vulnerable and ancient. "I'm working on it, Vross out." The comm went silent. Lyria's fingers found his shirt again, not gripping this time, just holding the fabric like it was an anchor in stormy seas. "You should leave me. Your crew will not wait." "Probably not, but I've always been terrible at following protocols." Kale began packing his equipment, already calculating the route to the escape pod bay. 2 decks up, across the main junction, through sections that his structural scans flagged as questionable at best. Carrying someone with a catastrophic leg injury, in a ship that was actively falling apart. "Besides, I didn't spend 20 minutes playing with that hydraulic jack just to leave you here. That would make me look indecisive." "You are insane." "That's what my medical license says too." "Well, it doesn't actually say that, but I'm pretty sure they were thinking it during the review board." He finished securing his pack and knelt beside her. "I'm going to lift you now. It's going to hurt in ways that will make you reconsider your opinion of my medical competence, which is already pretty low, so we're basically starting from rock bottom." "Wait." Lyria's hand moved from his shirt to his arm, her long fingers wrapping around his wrist. "Why are you doing this? You do not know me. Your people are leaving. This is illogical." Kale met her gaze, finding himself without a good answer. The logical response involved triage protocols and acceptable losses and risk-benefit analyses that all pointed toward leaving her behind. But logic had stopped being relevant somewhere around the moment she'd opened her eyes and asked him not to let go. "Because someone should have found you sooner," he said finally. "Because you waited 73 years, and that's a really long time to be alone. And because I'm apparently the kind of idiot who makes terrible decisions in dying spaceships." He slid his arms beneath her shoulders and knees, careful to avoid putting pressure on the splinted leg. She was lighter than he expected, or maybe adrenaline was doing heavy lifting his muscles couldn't manage. As he stood, she wrapped her arms around his neck, her face pressed against his shoulder, and whispered something his translator couldn't quite catch. "What was that?" he asked, starting toward the medical bay's exit. "I said your shirt smells like recycled protein bars and poor life choices." Despite everything, Kale laughed. "Yeah, well, you smell like 200-year-old spaceship and imminent medical complications, so we're even." The ship groaned around them, and somewhere in the distance, another bulkhead gave up its fight with entropy. The corridor outside the medical bay had developed opinions about structural integrity, and those opinions were mostly negative. Kale carried Lyria through sections where the walls had buckled inward like crushed cans, where ceiling panels hung by single bolts and swayed with each tremor that ran through the ship's frame. His arms were already burning from her weight, and they hadn't even made it to the first junction. "You are breathing very heavily," Lyria observed from her position against his shoulder. "That's because I skipped cardio for the last 6 months. Turns out carrying people through collapsing spaceships is excellent exercise. I should write a fitness guide." Kale paused at an intersection, consulting his scanner to check which route was least likely to kill them. Both options looked terrible. He chose left because the right corridor was currently venting atmosphere through a crack in the hull plating. In my culture, it would be shameful for a healer to struggle with physical tasks. In my culture, healers get gym memberships and lie about using them. We have evolved beyond shame. He adjusted his grip, trying to distribute her weight more evenly. How's the pain? Substantial. Your nerve block is wearing off. It's been 15 minutes. It's not supposed to wear off for hours. Kale stopped walking, shifting her carefully so he could pull out his scanner with one hand. The readings made him swear again, this time with less creativity and more genuine concern. Your metabolism is processing the medication at about 4 times the normal rate. That's either really impressive or really inconvenient. My people were engineered for survival. Fast healing, efficient systems, enhanced recovery. Lyria's voice was tighter now, pain bleeding through despite her attempt at composure. It seems the engineering did not account for alien painkillers. Of course it didn't. Why would anything be simple? Kale set her down as gently as he could against the corridor wall, ignoring her sharp intake of breath as her legs shifted. He dug through his medkit for the stronger stuff, the medication he'd been saving for genuine emergencies. This is going to make you feel strange, possibly euphoric, definitely confused. You might see things that aren't there. Will it stop the pain? It'll make you not care about the pain, which is basically the same thing. He administered the injection and watched her pupils dilate almost immediately. Her long ears twitched and then relaxed, lying flat against her skull in a way that suggested the medication was working fast. Maybe too fast. Lyria's hand found his shirt again, her fingers playing with the torn fabric she'd created earlier. Your garment is damaged. I have ruined it. I have other shirts. Most of them also smell like poor decisions, so you're not missing much. Kale checked his chronometer. 2 hours, 43 minutes until departure. The escape pod bay was still a deck and a half away. Through sections his structural scans were marking in increasingly alarming shades of red. Can you hold on for a few more minutes? I need to carry you again. I can hold on forever. I am extremely good at holding things. She demonstrated by gripping his shirt with both hands, her face suddenly very serious. See. Peak holding performance. That's the medication talking. You're high as a orbital station right now. Kale lifted her again, and this time she giggled, an incongruous sound in the groaning darkness of the dying ship. Human idioms are peculiar. Why would elevation correlate with intoxication? It makes no logical sense. Welcome to human language. Nothing makes sense and we're all just pretending. He started walking again, faster now despite his protesting muscles. The ship was deteriorating rapidly, power conduits sparking in the walls, lighting panels dying one by one as systems cascaded toward total failure. They'd made it perhaps 50 meters when the ship's PA system crackled to life, making Kale jump and nearly drop Lyria in the process. A voice emerged from speakers that had been silent for 2 centuries, distorted and broken but unmistakably artificial. Warning, structural integrity compromised. All personnel evacuate to designated emergency stations. This is not a drill. Warning. Structural. The message cut off, replaced by a horrific grinding sound, then resumed with different words. Eject threshold entering terminal phase. Recommend immediate, more static than a fragment that made Kale's blood run cold. Sabotage confirmed. Repeat, sabotage confirmed. Unknown hostiles have compromised primary systems. The unmaking cannot be allowed to follow. Initiate containment protocol. The message dissolved into white noise and died. Lyria had gone rigid in his arms, her earlier medication-induced relaxation evaporating. They knew. My people knew something was following us, and your people tried to stop us from fleeing. That's not my people. That's ancient history. But even as Kale said it, pieces were falling into place. The threshold's echo hadn't just gone silent, it had been silenced. Look, we can unpack the existential horror of what that message implies later. Right now, we need to focus on not dying in the next 2 hours. You believe in very short-term planning. It's kept me alive this long. Well, mostly alive. There was an incident with a plasma conduit that technically killed me for 90 seconds, but they brought me back, so I'm counting it as a win. Cale rounded another corner and nearly walked into a wall of debris. The corridor ahead had collapsed completely, forcing a detour through what his scanner identified as a recycling processing center. The detour added 12 minutes to their journey. Cale's arms had progressed from burning to numb to some new state beyond numb that probably had a medical term he'd learned in school and immediately forgotten. Lyria kept whispering things in her own language, fragments his translator couldn't parse, sometimes gripping his shirt, and sometimes just resting her head against his shoulder like she was listening to his heartbeat. "Tell me something true," she said suddenly, her words slurred slightly from the medication. "Something you have never told anyone." That's a concerning request from someone who's heavily drugged. "I want to know the person who is carrying me through the dark. If we die here, I want to know who you really are." Cale navigated around a fallen support beam, his chronometer marking 2 hours and 11 minutes remaining. "I became a medic because I couldn't save my brother. He died in a mining accident when I was 17. Crushed by falling equipment, actually, which makes this whole situation feel like the universe has a really cruel sense of irony." He'd never said that out loud before, not to anyone. "I spent 3 years in medical school thinking if I just learned enough, was good enough, I could somehow retroactively fix what happened. It took me a long time to realize that's not how time works." Lyria's fingers tightened on his shirt. "I am sorry about your brother, and I am sorry you found me. This is not fair to you." "Fairness is a human construct we invented to feel better about random chance. The universe doesn't care about fair." They'd reached the final junction before the escape pod bay. Cale could see the access corridor ahead, its emergency lighting still functional. "But I'm going to get you out of here anyway, because spite is also a human construct and I'm very good at it." The deck plates beneath them shuddered violently, and somewhere close, an entire section gave way with a sound like the end of the world. The explosion came from somewhere aft, close enough that Cale felt the pressure wave through the deck plating. The corridor ahead twisted violently, metal screaming as structural supports finally surrendered to forces they were never designed to withstand. Emergency klaxons that had been silent for 200 years suddenly found their voice, filling the air with a warning that came about 3 catastrophes too late. "I think your ship is angry we are leaving," Lyria said, her words still soft from the medication, but carrying an edge of clarity that suggested she was coming back to herself. "It's not my ship, and yes, it's absolutely furious." Cale ran now, ignoring his screaming muscles and the way his vision was starting to tunnel from exertion. The escape pod bay entrance was visible ahead, its access panel still showing green. Functional, possibly their only piece of good luck in the last hour. He slammed his palm against the access control, and the door groaned open with the reluctance of machinery that had forgotten its purpose. The bay beyond was smaller than he'd expected, designed for maybe 20 pods during the ship's operational lifetime. Most of the launch tubes were empty now, their pods jettisoned decades or centuries ago in emergencies that no one had survived to report. Only 3 pods remained, and Cale's scanner was already telling him things he didn't want to know about their operational status. "Please tell me at least one of those works," Lyria said. Cale set her down carefully against the wall and moved to the nearest pod, running his diagnostic scanner across its hull. Red lights. He moved to the second pod. More red lights, with a critical failure warning in the life support systems. The third pod made his scanner emit a sound somewhere between a beep and a resigned sigh before displaying yellow indicators. Yellow means maybe. I can work with maybe. He popped the pod's access panel and started pulling diagnostic data. The fuel cells were at 40% capacity, enough for a one-way trip to the nearest beacon, but not enough for course corrections or extended life support. The beacon was 8 days away at the pod's maximum sustainable velocity. They'd arrive with maybe 6 hours of air remaining if everything went perfectly, which in Cale's experience, things never did. His comm crackled. Reeves again, his voice tight with urgency. "Vross, we're lifting off in 20 minutes. Captain's moving up the schedule. Whatever section you're in just registered a massive structural failure. If you're still alive, get to a pod now." "Already there. I'm taking pod 3 from Bay 7. "Copy that. We'll notify rescue services to watch for your beacon signal." A pause. "Good luck, Vross." The comm went dead. 20 minutes. Cale ran the calculations in his head, then ran them again hoping the numbers would change. They didn't. The pod had room for 2 but consumables for 1 person, maybe 1.5 if they stretched it. 8 days to the beacon with 2 people breathing, eating, drinking. The math was ugly but not impossible. "You are thinking very loudly," Lyria observed from her position against the wall. "I can see it on your face." "I'm thinking that this pod was designed for 1 person, and we are distinctly 2 people, which creates certain logistical challenges." Cale pulled emergency supply containers from the bay's storage lockers, checking their seals and expiration dates. Most were decades past safe usage, but he found 3 that might be viable. "I'm also thinking that you're going to need another surgery within a week or you'll lose that leg. And this pod's medical suite is basically a first aid kit with delusions of grandeur. So we will die slowly instead of quickly. This is an improvement." Lyria's medication was definitely wearing off now. Her face had gone pale, that blue skin taking on an ashen quality that worried him. "We're not dying at all. I'm personally offended by the suggestion." Cale loaded the supplies into the pod, his hands moving through practiced efficiency while his mind raced ahead to the 1,000 things that could go wrong. "I'm going to get you into the pod. We're going to launch. And in 8 days we're going to reach that beacon where actual competent medical professionals will fix your leg properly. And if no one responds to the beacon, then we'll have 8 days to come up with increasingly ridiculous backup plans. I'm thinking we start with train you to be a one-legged space pirate and work backwards from there." Despite everything, Lyria smiled. It transformed her face, made her look less like the last survivor of a dead civilization and more like someone who might actually believe they had a future. "You make jokes because you are terrified." "I make jokes because the alternative is screaming, and screaming uses oxygen we'll need later." Cale moved to lift her again, but she stopped him with a hand on his arm. "Wait, before we leave." Her golden eyes held his, and the medication had worn off enough that he could see the full weight of whatever she was about to say. "Thank you, for staying, for not leaving me in the dark. I have been alone for so long that I had forgotten what it felt like to matter to someone." Cale felt something shift in his chest. A sensation that had nothing to do with exhaustion or fear, and everything to do with the way she was looking at him, like he'd done something heroic instead of just stubbornly refusing to accept the universe's terrible suggestions. "You're welcome. Now let's get out of here before this ship decides to make the decision for us." He lifted her into the pod, securing her in the crash harness while his hands checked connections and seals with automatic precision. She winced as her legs shifted, but her fingers found his shirt one more time, holding on while he worked. "Don't let go," she whispered, not planning on it. Cale climbed into the pod beside her, his larger frame making the space even more cramped than designed. He initiated the launch sequence, watching status displays scroll through pre-flight checks with agonizing slowness. The ship shuddered around them, and somewhere close another section collapsed. The pod's launch system activated with a sound like industrial violence. Acceleration crushed them both back into the harnesses as the pod shot through its launch tube and into open space. Through the small viewport, Cale watched the asterisk threshold's echo asterisk recede. its massive hull fracturing in real time as centuries of decay finally claimed their due. Explosions blossomed along its length like flowers, beautiful and terrible, and then they were far enough away that it became just another piece of debris in the Veil Nebula's vast darkness. Lyria's hand found his in the cramped space, their fingers intertwining. Not desperate now, not the grip of someone drowning, but the deliberate choice of two people who decided that facing the void together was better than facing it alone. 8 days, Cale said, checking their course toward the beacon. We should probably get to know each other, since we're going to be sharing recycled air and questionable emergency rations. Tell me about your world, about the things you miss. So he did. He told her about real gravity and natural sunlight, about his mother's terrible cooking and the way cities looked from orbit. She told him about canopy forests and the wind through branches wide as buildings, about art her people made from living crystal and songs that changed based on who was listening. They talked through the fear and the pain and the uncertainty, filling the small pod with words until it felt less like a coffin and more like a beginning. The beacon's signal pulsed ahead of them in the dark, a promise of rescue that might or might not come. But Cale had stopped calculating odds somewhere around the 3rd hour, when Lyria had fallen asleep with her head on his shoulder, and he'd realized he didn't actually care what the numbers said anymore. Sometimes the only story that mattered was the one where you chose not to let go.